8 million euros, moved across 5 blockchain networks in 48 hours, broken into dozens of small deposits, routed through a mixer, then landing on a MiCA-authorized exchange as clean, apparently unrelated transactions. Under MiCA combined with the AMLR and TFR, the CASP receiving those final transactions had specific legal obligations to monitor, detect, investigate, and report. This episode shows you exactly what those obligations look like in practice. Here's what makes chain hopping so dangerous for CASPs. The transaction that arrives on your platform looks small and routine. It is what happens 6 steps upstream that reveals the criminal architecture. Blockchain analytics is not optional equipment for a MiCA-compliant CASP. It is a legal requirement built into the AML framework. If a MiCA-authorized CASP fails to detect and report a suspicious transaction that its monitoring systems should have flagged, that failure is a breach of its AMLR obligations. An MLRO who signs off on an inadequate monitoring system can face personal liability, and the NCA has the power to suspend the CASP's license while investigating the failure. This is the highest stakes operational area of MiCA compliance. Let me walk you through the chain hopping typology step by step. Step 1. The criminal deposits Bitcoin from a darknet marketplace wallet onto Exchange A, which is either unregulated or weakly monitored. Step 2. The BTC is swapped via a decentralized exchange to Ethereum to break the blockchain trail. Step 3. The ETH passes through a mixing protocol, Tornado Cash or a similar service, to further obscure the origin. Step 4. The mixed ETH is swapped via a cross-chain bridge into USDT on a different network. Step 5. The USDT is split into 40 small deposits across multiple accounts, structuring, also known as smurfing, each below typical monitoring thresholds. Step 6. Those accounts aggregate the USDT and deposit it onto the MiCA-authorized CASP as apparently unrelated inflows. What does the MiCA-authorized CASP actually see when those 40 deposits arrive? On the surface, 40 small USDT transfers from 40 different wallet addresses across 2 days, each within normal transaction size ranges. Without blockchain analytics, they look routine. But blockchain analytics tells a completely different story. All 40 wallets were funded from the same mixing protocol output within a 24-hour window. The clustering is visible on-chain. A CASP without blockchain analytics capability literally cannot see this. For the transaction monitoring professionals watching this, what blockchain analytics tools does your CASP currently use? And more importantly, are they integrated into your monitoring rule engine, or are they a separate manual investigation step? The difference between integrated and manual matters enormously for your AMLR obligations. Drop your setup in the comments. The EBA's MLTF risk factor guidelines for CASPs explicitly state that CASPs should use blockchain analytics as part of their customer due diligence and ongoing monitoring. This is not a recommendation for large firms with big budgets. It is a supervisory expectation that applies proportionately. A smaller CASP may use a lighter touch tool, but the absence of any blockchain analytics capability at all is a red flag that NCAs will question during inspections and authorization reviews. Under MiCA's record-keeping obligations and the AMLR, a CASP must collect and retain specific data points for every transaction. These include the customer's IP address at the time of the transaction, the wallet address of origin and destination, the transaction hash on-chain, device fingerprint data, geolocation where available, the time and date, the transaction amount in both crypto and fiat equivalent, and for travel rule transfers, the originator and beneficiary information. This data must be retained for at least 5 years from the date of the transaction. The travel rule under the TFR, now fully applicable to CASPs, works as follows. When a CASP sends crypto to another CASP, it must transmit the originator's name, the originator's account identifier, wallet address or account number, the originator's address or national ID number or date and place of birth, and the beneficiary's name and account identifier. The receiving CASP must verify this information matches its customer records. If the information is missing, incomplete, or inconsistent, the receiving CASP cannot complete the transfer without investigation. Here is a real operational challenge called the sunrise issue. Not all global CASPs comply with the travel rule. When a MiCA-authorized CASP receives a transfer from a non-compliant counterparty, a non-EU exchange that does not send originator data, what must it do? The TFR requires the receiving CASP to have a policy for this situation. Options include requesting the missing data from the counterparty before releasing funds, applying enhanced monitoring to the transfer and the customer, or for repeat failures from the same counterparty, restricting or blocking transfers from that source entirely. The suspicious transaction report obligation under AMLR applies when a CASP has reasonable grounds to suspect that a transaction is connected to money laundering or terrorist financing. Under AMLR Article 69, the report must be submitted to the Financial Intelligence Unit without delay and without tipping off the customer. In the chain hopping case we walked through, the moment the blockchain analytics system flags the mixer origin for those 40 deposits, and the analyst confirms the clustering, reasonable grounds for suspicion exist. That is the STR trigger. The tipping off prohibition is one of the most practically challenging aspects of STR filing for CASPs. Once the MLRO decides to file an STR, the CASP cannot tell the customer that a report has been submitted or that they are under investigation. If the CASP needs to freeze or restrict the account, which it may need to do to preserve assets, it must find a business reason to communicate to the customer that does not reveal the STR. This requires a pre-drafted freeze and restriction communication strategy that the compliance team has ready before it is needed. I want to hear from MLROs and transaction monitoring professionals. What is the most difficult STR decision you have made at a CASP where the reasonable grounds threshold was genuinely unclear? Mixer interaction on its own, structuring below threshold, travel rule data mismatch. Share your case in the comments. This is where real practitioner knowledge advances the whole field. A MiCA-compliant transaction monitoring rule engine for a CASP must include at minimum structuring detection, transactions just below reporting thresholds across multiple accounts or time periods, mixer interaction flags, transactions linked on-chain to known mixing protocols, geographic anomaly alerts, activity from IP addresses or wallet addresses associated with high-risk jurisdictions that differ from the customer's stated location, velocity rules, transaction frequency or volume inconsistent with the customer's risk profile, and travel rule mismatch alerts, incoming transfers where originator data does not match the platform's customer record. I have documented the full chain hopping typology walkthrough with the monitoring rule logic, travel rule compliance flow, and STR decision tree at davinsidiligence.com. If you are designing or auditing a CASP transaction monitoring program, it is a practical resource worth your time. Full audio is on the DaVinci Diligence Spotify podcast. Transaction monitoring under MiCA is not about generating the most alerts. It is about detecting the right patterns, investigating them promptly, and filing STRs where reasonable grounds exist, all without tipping off the customer, and all with documentation that survives FIU and NCA scrutiny. The chain hopping case we walked through today is solvable, with integrated blockchain analytics, a rule engine calibrated to crypto-specific typologies, and an MLRO who understands when the STR threshold is crossed. Subscribe to keep following this series. Episode 7 is the stablecoin deep dive. We look at what MiCA Titles 3 and 4 actually require of ART and EMT issuers, how reserve management, redemption rights, and EBA supervision work, and we simulate a systemic stablecoin failure under MiCA to show what the supervisory response looks like. That is episode 7. Do not miss it.